Welcome back everybody. In this series we talk flipping cars. It's a nasty little habit you can get yourself into, but geez, it's a lot of fun. I've got 5 easy steps to keep you out of trouble, and in this episode we go through what they are and show you how it's done. Now before we go through the steps, we've got this 1999 Mitsubishi dual cab ute. It's an auto, which I'll get into, and it's got a drop side tray. Now I've done the wrong thing. I bought this 2.5 years ago and we've still got it. Now while it's not pretty, it's got discoloured bumpers, the seats were a bit daggy, the starter motor's a bit clicky. I fell in love with it because it's a great little ute. Now the other golden rule of car flipping is you really don't want too many cars sitting around in the driveway. The missus won't be happy, your neighbours probably won't be happy, and you're holding a lot of cash. The idea is to get them, fix them up, flip them and send them back down the road. Sometimes it's not that easy, but you need to be careful with what you're doing because you can get yourself in pretty deep. So our second surplus car that we've got here is a 2007 Volvo S40 T5 all-wheel drive. Now I picked this up the other day and I normally wouldn't spend this much money. However, I think with a little bit of TLC, this can come up looking great, and for the money, I really couldn't say no. So my number one step is to do your research. Constantly hunt around on Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, eBay, wherever you buy your cars from. There you will learn a lot. You'll learn what sells, what doesn't, what hangs around for a long time, and from there you can pick yourself up some real bargains. Firstly, if you see a car that's been for sale for quite some time, it's clearly going to be negotiable, especially if they want to get rid of it. Yes, there could be something wrong with it, but I think in most cases it comes down to a poor ad, a lack of description, and hardly any photos. So go into the photos and hunt around and see what you can investigate before you go and have a look at that ride you're looking to buy. In this case, this was advertised as a standard S40 Volvo sedan. The photos were quite dark, you couldn't really tell a lot about it, and on first appearance it wasn't all that appealing. Now, with all the cars I look at, particularly if they're a little bit different, I always go and do a heap of research on how reliable they are, common problems, so you're well informed if you're looking to do the purchase, talk to the owner, and discover if there's any problems. Now there was one little thing I noticed when I was looking at the ad for this particular Volvo. It's these two badges on the boot. Now as I said, it was advertised as a standard S40 sedan, but these two badges gave it away. So as it turns out, this is a 5-cylinder turbo all-wheel drive model. It's worth a lot more than a standard S40 sedan, and it's a lot more appealing for those that are hunting around for something like this. So do a bit of hunting around, forensically investigate those photos that are included with the listing and see what you can find. My second most important advice, unless you're looking at something very, very specific, is to always go auto. You greatly reduce the market if you're looking at a manual model. And in your research, you will find the manual models stick around for a very long time, as there is a decreasing number of the population that want to buy a manual car. The point of difference being, if you buy a 4-wheel drive or a ute, you may get away with it. Now our Triton ute, for example, I targeted an auto, which sounds really unusual, but a lot of young people these days, even tradies, only know how to drive an auto. So that gives you a market advantage with something like a ute. If you've got a young apprentice out there hunting for his first work ute, he learned to drive on an auto, doesn't know how to drive a manual, doesn't have a license for a manual, then that auto ute is going to appeal to him. Same thing if it's a family ute, they're doing a few renos around the house, it's much easier to drive the auto around than relearn to drive a manual. Now, the other little trick I have noticed is, if you see manual ads, always go into them. Quite often you will find automatic transmission cars incorrectly listed as manuals, because sometimes that might be the standard that comes up. Now, you're cutting out all the buying competition, because a lot of people, again, won't go into that ad because it is described incorrectly. So that's my valuable little tip if you get anything out of this episode, is to always go into the ad if you're curious, just to double check, is it an automatic, is it a manual? And as I said, go through all those photos and make sure the listing matches exactly what the car is, because there are bargains to be had out there, people. You just have to look around and do your research and investigation. Now, the third piece of advice is to be selective. You don't want to go and buy the childhood dream you couldn't afford, or something a little bit quirky which you think would be quite fun to own. You want to be smart about this. I typically steer away from your Commodores and Falcons purely because there's hundreds available. The market for these are huge and competition is high. More importantly, you want something that a lot of people are looking for. At the moment, yeah, it might be SUVs or it's small cars. So this particular Volvo, which I'll keep using in this example, now it's loosely based on Mazda 3 and the Ford Focus. So it's a nice, compact, smart little car. Now sometimes I'd steer clear of European cars over, say, your Japanese small hatchbacks, because they're not as popular. But because this runs a similar motor to the XR5 Turbo Focus, thought it's probably not too bad. The XR5 Ford Focus hatches, they're retailing for between 10 and 12,000, which is twice as much as what I paid for this sedan. So it's a bit of a sleeper. It does have a bit of a cult following, but I think because it's the same price as a Mazda 3 or a Toyota Corolla or something like that, it's got a little bit of an edge because it's got the luxury that doesn't come with those vehicles. My fourth piece of advice is condition. Through your research, you will notice common issues with quite a number similar model cars. For example, all the cars that most people are looking to flip, which sit in that 90s to early 2000s age range, have a number of issues. Clear coat, paint delamination is a major issue on these models. They're at the age now where it's all starting to deteriorate. So I typically focus on white or light coloured cars, or make sure when I look at photos, they look reasonably sound. If you're looking at a high kilometre model, paint fade is always going to be an issue. And when you're dealing with the aesthetics of a vehicle, it's very hard and expensive to fix unless you're in the trade or you know someone that can fix it cheaply for you. But if you don't know what you're doing, don't think you can try to fix it yourself. You can end up with a problem that's much worse than what you started with. When it comes to interiors, you'll also notice a number of common issues. Commodores and Falcons in particular have an issue with the foam back material they started using on the seats, delaminating, becoming all floppy inside. Now for me, that's a major turn-off. Pay attention to door cards in photos. If all the fabric's falling off them, that's another thing you probably want to get fixed. Now, it's not all bad news when it comes to that. If you find a vehicle that is a little bit worn out inside, you can quite easily source replacement parts, unclip them, unbolt them and replace them. Now this is a really good trick to buying something that needs a little bit of TLC. Yes, you need to spend a bit of money, but you can quickly turn it back around with a bit of shampoo, some replacement parts, and get it looking almost brand new. So the perfect flip car, in my opinion, is something you don't need to do too much work to. Give it a quick detail, shampoo the interior, blacken all the plastics, and make it look brand new again. That to me is a perfect scenario. Every now and again, you might find something with mechanical issues. Do your research and make sure you're well informed. If you're mechanically minded and don't mind having a go, squeaking pulleys, worn out batteries, starter motors, all that simple sort of stuff is quite easy to diagnose, and you can get yourself a really, really good buy. Because you have to remember, there's a lot of people out there that aren't mechanically minded, they don't have the time, all the money to fix things, so they just pop it up for sale. So you could spend a few $100s replacing some parts and get the car back on the road and ready to sell and make a decent profit. Where you do want to be careful is where a car might have ongoing electrical problems. Now, I got caught with one of these last year where I bought a CH Lancer. It's a fly-by-wire throttle body and as such has an electronic accelerator pedal. I did my research before I went out there. I thought, yeah, this is great. I'll be able to fix this easy. And I was chasing problems in that thing forever. In the end, I gave up and just got rid of it because it was taking up too much of my time and I just couldn't fix it. I replaced the MAF, the accelerator pedal, the throttle body, and once you start pulling parts off and finding they've got wrecker numbers already on them, you know you're already delving into somewhere that someone has already been and hasn't been able to solve themselves. There was obviously an electrical gremlin somewhere through there, potentially the ECU needed to be replaced, and to be honest, I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole. So once again, do your research, get a car that's in decent condition, that to your ability you can turn it around and make it the most presentable vehicle you can to make that money back and make a successful flip. Now, one other thing that I look at is wheels. The wheels on this Volvo are heavily curb rashed. We were fortunate enough that a second set of rims came with the purchase. However, with the Mondeo that I bought last year, I was able to find some brand new factory mags and I simply swapped the rims onto the new tyres that were on it and sent it back down the road. Simply by updating or changing the wheels, it makes a massive improvement to the appearance of the vehicle. People come up, first thing they look at are the wheels. They're in perfect condition and their eyes start going away from other little issues you might have on the vehicle also. As everyone says, appearance matters. A lot of people are interested in how a car looks. Yes, it needs to go properly, but to make the sale, to catch people, you need to have something that looks good and is well presented. The last thing to look at is registration. Now, we live in New South Wales and you have to get a safety inspection every year. You've got two scenarios. You buy something with a decent amount of rego, that gives you time to clean it up, sort out any issues, and list it up for sale with a reasonable amount of rego that will appeal to a buyer. Buyers get turned off once you get down to under a month's worth of rego, and many of them will move on when they see in the ad that it's only got a few weeks rego left. Where you might get away with that is where the vehicle has had an inspection 6 months prior and does not need to go through another inspection. Clearly list in your ad that an inspection is not required, or even better, just pop the 6 months rego on it and then you've got a much more saleable item. The other trick around this is you start hunting around for cars that are due for their rego to expire, or the rego has just expired. If the vehicle's in good enough condition, it'll generally pass the safety inspection. You pop some rego on it and you're back in the same position. Now, the advantage here is that you're in the key position to negotiate. The seller obviously doesn't have the time, money, or inclination to get the vehicle registered, and they just want to dispose of it. You can pick up a real bargain that only needs a tiny little bit of TLC if you're willing to go through the steps to do the rego inspection and get the registration put on it. Make sure you're allowed to cover the registration costs in your budget. Stick to that budget and you really can't go wrong. So that concludes the first episode of this series. I hope you enjoyed it. Now in the next episode, we're going to detail up this Volvo, probably do the same with the Ute and get them both ready for sale. And then hopefully at the end of the episode, they're both gone. We can do a bit of a reflection and see if we made any money. Anyway, thanks for watching. As I always say, be safe, get out there and have some fun.